So for those of you who are actually tuning in here on YouTube, I wanted to go over kind of just a little preview of the pack that I run for shed hunting. It is nothing fancy, and that's really why I wanted to show it to you. So this is a Kafari pack I've been running for a while. It used to have a hip belt on it. I stepped on the buckle and broke it, so I have not replaced it. It's just a little day pack. I don't even know how many cubic inches it is, but it's just a tiny little day pack. The nice thing about this, though, is that it has options. So not only does it have compression straps here where I can add different things on or clip them on, but it also has this bungee up front. So right now it's got, let's see, one, two, three antlers in it. This is from one of our last hauls out into the mountains. And I just set them in there. I just kind of tuck them right here on the outside of my pack. And because I'm not looking for elk antlers and I can't keep deadheads, I don't need anything bigger. So I just take a leash for my dog. I take some snacks, some water, a few other items, sometimes a rain jacket or a puffy, depending on where I'm at. And then I'll wear my binos on my chest so that I can do my glassing that way. I didn't want you to feel like you have to have some big, expensive, crazy pack or go out there with a bunch of gear. You just need, good boots. I like a pair of gaiters. I always take trekking poles because Courtney likes to dive down into the deep stuff. A pack, any layers that might be applicable for the area that you're in or the weather that you might be facing. Did I say snacks and water? Snacks and water are always, always, always on the list. And of course, I also bring a sidearm.
Welcome to the Soul Summit podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Prete. I'm here to help bridge the gap for women and families in the outdoors, build a community of adventure junkies, and roll out your weekly dose of positive vibes. With almost 2 decades in the health and fitness world and an untamable passion for hunting in the outdoors, my mission is to help you live your bucket list life and move boldly in the direction of your dreams. Meet us here weekly as I connect with like-minded outdoor men and women to discuss health and mindset, accountability, life and entrepreneurship, as well as all things hunting and epic untold stories.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Summit podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Prete, and I'm really excited to chat with you today about a topic and a hobby that is one of my absolute favorite things to do and probably my biggest obsession. We're talking today about shed hunting, and not just any shed hunting. We're talking about blacktail shed hunting here in Western Oregon. Many of the tips and tricks that I give you for shed hunting can be used across the board for different species, but definitely I can tell you that my obsession is finding the hard to find blacktail sheds here in Western Oregon, thick underbrush with lots of opportunities to fall off the face of a cliff. But you know what? When you find them, it's kind of like that extra little you did well if you can pull a needle out of a haystack. So today we're talking about shed hunting. I was originally kind of turned on to this, I would say, in my probably early 30s. So I grew up as a hunter and out all the time, but we would probably, I guess I remember leaving them in the woods primarily probably because they were crusty old white antlers. But we didn't care too much about them until I got older, of course, and had a home and wanted to decorate with them and do projects. But honestly, what kind of started out as like a curiosity of like, can I go and find, a couple of antlers out there, became for me such like an incredibly exciting time of year. It comes off for me. I deal with, I don't know if I want to call it seasonal depression, but I will say like my environment, the weather environment for me is really important. I feel much more low energy as most people do when it's gray and overcast and rainy and foggy and those kinds of things. And then as it starts to get nicer, I find myself wanting to be out more and more and get that time in the field. So it's definitely good for kind of like that, staying in shape, getting more physically after coming off of winter. But I also feel like it has so many different purposes across the board, from your mental health and your movement, also from getting to scout new areas, getting to see what's out there, getting a lay of the land and maybe where you hunt. I started shed hunting just on my own. I'd go out, find some trails, whatever the case was. Now I have a shed hunting dog. Her name is Reese. She is the love of my life. No, and all jokes aside, she's a wire hair pointing Griffon, and she's bred for bird hunting, not shed hunting. But I just fell in love with her. I fell in love with her personality. And so, early on, what I did with her was I got her out and I really started to work on obedience. Now, can you have a really good working dog that doesn't listen to you very much? Yes, I suppose you can. But for me, I really wanted to be able to enjoy the entire process, trust her and know that, when we're out there off leash or whatever the case is, that she recalls well and has a good obedience foundation. And so we started with that. And then we went to shed training. So I did a various kind of different trainings with her, from getting the white decoy dummy at something like your local sporting goods store or farm store. I found ours at the local Wilco, and then using some scent on it. And then I introduced real sheds when I trusted that she wasn't going to get hurt and kind of knew how to mouth them. And then I got into show season a couple years ago, and I was like, okay, she's still in this really pivotal learning stage. I want her, to have constructive time, when I'm in show season and working, 12+ hour days. So I sent her to a trainer. I sent her over to David Ryden of Ryden Gun Dogs, I think is his name. I should have looked that up previous to this, but David Ryden, he's over in Terrebonne, Oregon, and he's phenomenal. He works with primarily just Griffs, and he's got a great training program. So he was really able to help me help her solidify her retrieving skills, her, searching skills. And so I have her now. Now, this podcast today is not about a shed hunting dog or training a shed hunting dog. That's certainly something I could dive off into a whole tangent on. But today we just want to talk about how to find more antlers and some tips and tricks that I think that you can use to be more successful when you're out in the field. So first, it's important to understand not all animals that grow headgear, we'll just call it, shed. When you're talking about sheep or, pronghorn, those goats and sheep are going to keep their horns, right? So they're not going to shed those every year. So what we're talking about is ungulate species that have antlers that fall off. That fall off happens after, the breeding cycle, when, they've used those antlers for either fighting or for displays for their mating. And so, they're coming off of that. The hormone has changed. The light during the day has changed. And so those antlers eventually just fall off. Well, if you think about where they're falling off, you got to think about the time of year that they're falling off specific to each species. So, where one species might move a little higher or lower on the mountain with some extra snow, the other species might move opposite of that. So know your species, definitely. But we're talking today about how to find those, and really, really specifically talking about how to find blacktail sheds. We'll also talk a little bit about Roosevelt sheds, which will translate over to some Rocky Mountain stuff. But just know, when I'm talking about this is really from my personal experience with finding blacktail sheds here in Western Oregon. So really important, like I said, to think about the timing, like what animal are you targeting? Where are they during that time of the year? And naturally kind of start there. If you don't know, you can call biologists. You can look at migratory patterns for things like mule deer or elk. But just know in general where you're going to start looking. And it can also be important to note that, obviously these species aren't always going to stay in the same areas. Now, that's not always true. There's so many nuances, so it's sometimes hard to talk on things, but some antlered animals like elk are going to probably winter in different areas. So you're not going to go up into where you were hunting them all fall and likely find antlers there. You need to find those wintering areas. So again, I'm going to just say it. Know what animal you're looking for and where they are during the time that they're shedding. Number one, we're going to start with knowing your rules. Now, years ago, this didn't really have as much weight as it does now that many of these states have started implementing different hunting seasons. Some states have actually started implementing that you need a hunting license in order to be able to go out and do shed hunting. And of course, some other states have different seasons. So first of all, always know your state, the local regulations, dates, any restrictions. Double check, double check, double check. we are going into areas, kind of at the start of, or sometimes even in winter and into spring when animals are resting, right? They're really coming off of that breeding cycle, like I talked about. Maybe some of them have been coming off of hard winters. So respect the animals. That's so, so important that, even if you are within the regulations for the areas that you're going to be shed hunting, just really respecting wildlife. Don't chase them, don't harass them. Don't let your animals harass them, and really give that good respect. I feel like that goes a long ways when it comes to, thinking about our hunting ethics and the heritage that we're leaving behind. So also know your land, know boundaries, private areas, public areas, knowing where you're at physically is so important. That's why I always use Onyx maps. I use them for anything. If I'm going to go into an area that I might not have the best service, I'm downloading offline maps, but I'm always being very cautious of any of the private boundaries that I don't have access to. Those things are really, really important. And things that, we always want to be respectful and mindful of other people's property and what we can and can't be doing. So know the seasons, and then of course know the land that you're going to be on. And then I say hunt with intention. Now, you might be coming at this from the angle of like, hey, I'm a parent. I want to get my child out there. I want to go in kind of like a more leisurely, like that's fine. When I'm thinking about going out there, one, it's time, right? It's time to drive out to the locations. It's time away from work or your family or whatever you had to say no to say yes to go shed hunting. So for me personally, I really try to prioritize the time. If I'm going to go out and it's only going to be, like an hour, I'm probably not going to, unless it's just for running the dog or some other kind of purpose. If I'm going to go out there and I want to go like find sheds, like, okay, it's prime time, I want to find these sheds, I'm probably going to carve out between 4 and 6 hours. For me, my shed hunting spot that I go to pretty frequently is about 40 minutes away or so. So it can be an investment, right? Like you're literally for a half a day about going to, say no to whatever. So think about going out there, with all of the proper thing and with intention. Don't go out there just to rush, because what happens if you go in an area, you're like, hey man, I always see good mature bucks in here. I want to go and shed hunt this area. Well, that's great. If you go in there with an hour and that spot needs, 4 hours to shed hunt, you're probably going to skim through it so briefly that, especially if you're not using a dog, you'll leave sheds there. You'll walk away. You've said, I've already been in that area. And then you're likely leaving sheds on the ground. Are there worse things? Sure, there are. But for me personally, there's not. So anyway, that's how I like to do it. Go in there to take my time. Don't rush around. If you're in a really hot zone, which we'll talk about how to find those, I would say turn on your Onyx maps or some sort of a tracking and track as you grid through there. I like to grid and shed hunt in general with the wind at my face, because you can smell deadheads, you can smell, heavy game areas. So, and now for me with Reese, my shed hunting dog, it makes sense. I want to be hunting into the wind as much as possible so that she has opportunities to catch those scents. But I would also say when it comes to gridding, it can be really nice because, a lot of times when we're shed hunting, we want to kind of stay on these game trails, especially when you find good heavy use game trail areas. You can have the natural tendency to want to just stay on that trail. I feel like with gridding, you are actually able to do like what we don't see a lot of times is, that game trail is moving through a transitional area from maybe bedding to feeding. But what we don't see is that these deer have a habit of like, oh, I'm going to step off the trail. Like they're not going to, it's not a road. There's nobody, like they're going to go wherever they want to go. And what I find a lot of times, especially again with blacktail bucks, is they're going to step off the trail. They're going to kind of deviate to, could be in a salal bush, to eat, or a briar bush to eat, right? So you can lose those antlers, they can lose those antlers in something that might be a foot or 2 feet tall, and you just would never see it unless you actually took the time to grid through there. And then the tracking, of course, is nice because then you can see where you've already been and you're not just retracing your steps and wasting kind of time there. I also say when it comes to like gridding, it's nice because as opposed to just staying on known game trails, you're changing your perspective. And I feel like so many times, like finding brown sheds is typically fairly easy, especially for me in these situations, because they're laying on top. They're not on snow. There's no snow maybe above or below them. They're not packed down into anything. But sometimes when I'm like just in general, like I want to go into an area and I want to find all the sheds, I don't care if they're brown or crusty or whatever, changing perspective will sometimes just allow you to see a tine pop out, where you wouldn't have seen it from a different angle, or maybe move around a bush to get a better perspective, or like I said, just a different angle on something. Sometimes I'll even go, from standing to kneeling and look, because my eye level is going to change and those tines might pop. But I feel like once you key your eye in to recognize whether it's the shine or the color or the, sharpness to the tine itself, I feel like it becomes so easy to go, I spot it. I spot it. There it is right there. So definitely don't be afraid to implement those. Also talking about like best conditions to go out in. Now, if I'm going personally, like just myself, I'm not taking a dog, I don't care too much. I do feel like after the rain, the antlers tend to pop. Like they just have a shine to them that like a twig or a branch on the ground isn't going to have. It does sometimes help them stand out a little bit more. I will say that dogs can have it a harder time, in foggy conditions, or if it's raining, they might have a little bit harder time detecting that scent as opposed to a nicer dry day. So that can affect it. I also try to time which areas I'm going to be hunting, where the sun will be, so time of day, and then where I'll be walking in relation to the sun. So if you're out and you're walking around and you're trying to see something, but the sun is like blinding you or like at an angle where it's right in your eyes, you're not going to pick up the same that you would if maybe the sun was at your back and shining into these areas or just dead overhead. So think about that. If you're really straining to see, you can't quite, just if it doesn't feel easy to see, like if you wouldn't want to be driving into it, I wouldn't want to be shed hunting into it. I tend to like to go out when it's kind of crappy conditions, just because then I know I'm not as likely to run into other people on the trail or out in the woods. So I don't mind getting out there in those conditions, but it does sometimes make it a little harder for maybe your animal or yourself to find them. So let's also talk about cues, like what features would I be looking for to, go into an area and, looking at it on the map, I'm looking for a few of these key features. I'm going to be looking for bedding areas. I'm going to be looking for benches. I'm going to be looking for south facing slopes, transitional areas. So definitely think about, where are these animals hanging out? Like I just talked about in the beginning of this, where are they hanging out for the time of year that it is? South facing always seems to be pretty productive. I feel like, of course, with that time of year being, late winter, early spring, or into the, mid-spring season, these animals are hanging out where there's more sunshine because there's going to be more food, more things sprouting up in those areas. It's going to be warmer. So they're going to tend to be on the south facing slopes. Don't discount though just benches or ridge lines, and I know I'm trying to like say everything, but also I have found some of my best blacktail buck sheds on the north facing slopes. So I don't know if it just happenstance that I found some really gnarly, like old, looks like really, really old mature bucks on that north side in those shedding seasons, but that could definitely be something to look for. If I'm in an area that looks really promising, has a lot of the other sign or things that I'm looking for, I will take some trips down to those north side slopes and hit those. I'll look for game trails. I'll walk the game trails, find the bedding areas, etc. And then I can get into some sheds there as well. I'm also constantly looking for signs. So for me, shed hunting is filling my cup in so many other ways, but it's also allowing them to see what is in here, what animals were in here. You might be finding rubs, and those are great signs. Like, are there lots of rubs? Are there big rubs? Are there small rubs? Is there scat? Are you seeing lots of scat? Are you finding lots of bedding areas? Are you seeing doe tracks or fawn tracks or buck tracks? Like, just take inventory of all of the things that you're seeing when you're out and about, because even if it's not something that's going to help you get an animal on the ground then, because it's not season, then it can help you get a little bit more information as you do your scouting for your hunting opportunities. So definitely don't discount looking for things like fresh scat, tracks, rubs, etc. Watering areas can also be good. And I was going to go into a whole tangent about watering, but that's kind of something else. Here on the west side, there's just so much water, in most of these areas that I don't focus too much on water itself. Now, I will key in on water in a situation like there's, maybe there's heavy game traffic coming in or out. I'll follow those in or out trails as well as actually walk the water itself a bit to see if sometimes maybe I find another game trail or a better game trail coming in and out of that water hole. Or sometimes I find those animals kind of hang out in that watering area and then might deviate to a different trail. So definitely keep an eye on the watering spots. I also like to mark those if I am in an area that tends to hold a little less water during the fall seasons or late in summer. I'll actually note any good water sources. That way, if I am hunting in there in the future and it's been noted as a really good water source, it might have opportunity to hold water during the hunting season. And or it could also become a wallow. So good to know. Little side tip there. I would also talk about using your equipment, right? Like so many of us have binoculars that we use for, hunting big game, but think about using your binoculars to basically grid for you, to be your boots. Now, I won't use the optics in place of actually boots on the ground, getting to go out there and do some shed hunting. But if I'm in an area, especially if I'm up on a ridge maybe and I'm looking down into like a big drainage that's usually in these areas pretty thick, they'll likely have some open areas. So I'll actually get my binos out and I'll scan the ground. I can scan the ridge line. Any time I find a good area that I don't necessarily want to walk down into because a lot of these areas are steep, I'll just get my glass out and I'll just give it a thorough kind of gridded over with my optics and making sure I'm not leaving anything obvious on the ground. And then if I'm staying up on that upper elevation, or if I can, move around a little bit, change that angle, and then I'll glass kind of the same areas with a different angle and likely pick up something that way. So don't be afraid to do that as opposed to just getting your boots on the ground and, doing a ton of miles. I think it's not necessarily the miles that matter. Yes, you can have more opportunity to pick things up, but you really want to be dialing in all of these other features. Are you in the areas that they're in during that time? Are you paying attention to the areas that they're going to specifically be in, transitional areas, bedding areas, feeding areas, those kinds of things. And then the last thing I'll say for right now is, and I kind of previously mentioned this like, should we just leave all of these like little edits in today and you guys are gonna be like, she's a psycho, she can't talk? Previously I mentioned this, but I was talking about using the wind. Now, unfortunately, and don't even get me started. It is, anyway, neither here nor there. But in Oregon, you can't keep deadheads. So I have found several deadheads this year, and it is highly irritating to walk away from them in the woods. But anyways, I'm going to move off that topic. If you hunt the wind, you're much more likely to find those deadheads. So if you're in an area, especially that you can keep them, good on you. You can go out there and it won't be a total loss. As I mentioned previously, please keep in mind ethics when it comes to shed hunting. Of course, in addition to following any regulations that there might be in your area or in your state, and have fun with it. It's such a great time to be out there exploring, getting a little bit better awareness of the area that you might be hunting in, learning the animal patterns and the terrain. I think sometimes, the more time we can spend in an area, the better we can get to know it, which will sometimes uncover some hidden features or areas that you might have overlooked had you not been out there with boots on the ground. So if you get out there, let me know. I would love to know how it goes for you. It's truly like finding nature's treasure. There's, an equal amount of joy now, and it's a little bit different, but like watching Reese retrieve a shed, as opposed to like the initial excitement, like looking down and finding one or glassing one up. Like I'm equally as excited, but man, it sure is fun. Well, I hope that this podcast episode today has encouraged you to get out there, to deepen your love for the animals that you're pursuing in the fall. getting a little bit better lay of the land and getting some scouting time in, and of course, keeping yourself ready physically for any adventure that comes up. I also want to bring up that we've talked a little bit about the master classes that are coming out. There is going to be a sign up coming very soon. So make sure you are in the community, you're staying in the loop. We've got master classes that are launching for free in season 9 of the podcast. So you have that to look forward to. We've got so many great pros coming on to talk about actually helping you build your skills. So building your confidence and abilities in the outdoors. And we're going to be doing those hands-on virtual classes. So I think that'll be great for you to dive into. We've also got the mother-daughter retreat giveaway going on now. You can find the link to nominate yourself for another mother-daughter duo in the show notes. We have been so grateful to be reading some of the nominations coming through. It sounds like an incredible group of women, and we certainly cannot wait to give one away. Thank you to our partner Tracer Tripods for making that opportunity possible. They are such a great partner, great company, great equipment, and I highly recommend you go check them out. That's Tracer Tripods. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming up next for me and something that will be highlighting for you. So this is just kind of a little side note, kind of more of a personal angle here, but in New Zealand over this last winter, I was there for a girls' hunt and had just the most ridiculously simple fall and retore out my bad shoulder, so my right shoulder. And it's been really giving me fits when it comes to archery, which I just am not willing to accept. So I'm going to be walking through the journey of shooting left-handed and seeing what that looks like. I'm going to take everybody along for that journey. So I will be documenting the whole thing and making sure that people can chime in and ask questions. And I'm doing this because, one, shoulder injuries are so common, right? This is my second round with it. It's something I've had to be adaptive with in the past. I shot a mouth tab for a while. And, I know so many other men and women that are affected by some sort of an injury that's happened that is now, preventing you from getting to shoot your bow or be a bow hunter, whatever that is for you. And, outside of that, I also have people that come in and say, I never knew to chest eye dominance and I'm shooting right-handed, but I'm left eye dominant. So I think it's a really, it's very common that you start, archery shooting one side or the other, and then something comes up that kind of provokes this idea of shooting with the other side. So I want to walk through what it's going to look like with me. I anticipate it's going to be a bit messy. I'm going to feel like a total newbie, which is fine, right? If I want to be able to preserve and have this as a hobby and a way of life that I can do for a long time, I've got to figure out how I can make it doable for my body. So I'm going to jump in messy and all. I'm going to head up to G4 Archery and shoot some bows with their team up there. They're a fantastic team up in Hillsboro. So that's going to be coming up. I will for sure walk you through that and everything that looks like in case there's questions or anybody that wants to chime in there. So for those of you who are actually tuning in here on YouTube, I wanted to go over kind of just a little preview of the pack that I run for shed hunting. It is nothing fancy, and that's really why I wanted to show it to you. So this is a Kafari pack I've been running for a while. It used to have a hip belt on it. I stepped on the buckle and broke it, so I have not replaced it. It's just a little day pack. I don't even know how many cubic inches it is, but it's just a tiny little day pack. The nice thing about this, though, is that it has options. So not only does it have compression straps here where I can add different things on or clip them on, but it also has this bungee up front. So right now it's got, let's see, three antlers in it. This is from one of our last hauls out into the mountains. And I just set them in there. I just kind of tuck them right here on the outside of my pack. And because I'm not looking for elk antlers and I can't keep deadheads, I don't need anything bigger. So I just take a leash for my dog. I take some snacks, some water, a few other items, sometimes a rain jacket or a puffy, depending on where I'm at. And then I'll wear my binos on my chest so that I can do my glassing that way. I didn't want you to feel like you have to have some big, expensive, crazy pack or go out there with a bunch of gear. You just need, good boots. I like a pair of gaiters. I always take trekking poles because Courtney likes to dive down into the deep stuff. A pack, any layers that might be applicable for the area that you're in or the weather that you might be facing. Did I say snacks and water? Snacks and water are always on the list. And of course, I also bring a sidearm. So those are the things that I bring in with me when I am shed hunting here in Western Oregon. Before I jump off today, I want to remind you we've got giveaways going on, lots of retreats and things happening. So head over to our presenting partner, Her Outdoor Journeys website, heroutdoorjourney.com, and check out all of the great things going on over there, as well as our sponsoring partners have some great discounts and opportunities for you to dive in. So find all of that in our show notes. We're so glad that you jumped in today with us, and hopefully you're able to go out there and find a few shed antlers of your own.
The Soul Summit podcast is brought to you by Maven Optics, Baku e-bikes, Hoyt Archery, Onyx Maps, and Sawyer Products. For more information on these companies or to access the Soul Summit podcast discount codes, be sure to check out our show notes.